Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion. And today I wanted to discuss, well, it's a narrative that's been going around for some time, especially amongst the religious folks. And it's sort of their pushback towards the secularists, atheists, agnostics, for pretty much trashing the whole idea of religion. And what this accusation is to throw back at us that we are, in fact, a religion. I'm sure by now many of you have heard some religious figure, talk about how secularism is a religion these days. Secular religion, you know? Everybody dedicates their time, dedicates everything to secularism. They live their life by secularism the way the religious do, by whichever doctrine they follow: Christianity, Islam, Judaism, take your pick, and any of the other ones. Several years ago, there was this exact argument going on about atheism, how atheism is a religion in of its own. But that didn't really work, did it? Because when you said atheism is a religion of its own, well then every single atheist could just look at you and say, you do realize the literal definition of an atheist is the lack of belief in God, and a religious person has belief in God. More specifically, a supernatural being or deity, but their supernatural deity is God. So it did not work out. It crashed. That argument crashed and burned very fast for that very reason. You could not attribute to people who don't believe a belief system. The modern day religious people, the new Puritans, are now secularists. Well, this doesn't really work just for the actual definition of religion and secularism, so we can actually look into that right now to figure that out. So the first definition is religious, which, if we're going back to the root word religion, is from Latin, which is religio, which meant to respect what is sacred. So God is sacred, God's objects are sacred, to respect them. But then let's not forget, religion and faith come pretty much hand in hand. You almost cannot separate religion and faith. You need them together. And faith is the complete trust in something. And usually when you're using the term faith, it means regardless of empirical evidence. So it does not matter what evidence you are presented, you will believe whatever it is you believe. And I find that this actually makes sense with how some religious people act. I think it was my last episode, maybe a couple before, where I made reference to, during a debate between Bill Nye and Ken Ham, that when there was a debate about God, when asked what would need to be presented to them in order for them to change their positions, Bill Nye said, you would have to present me with evidence of God's existence, in order for me to believe, like reputable evidence that I can verify and many others can verify. I think that's a pretty rational thing to say, considering how that's how we do it just on a regular day-to-day basis. If anybody wants to tell you something unbelievable, what's the first thing you say? Show me the evidence. What proof do you have? If somebody came running up to you and claimed your brother killed someone, you're going to say, well, what proof do you have? What evidence do you have that my brother was the one who killed him? Just as an example. But then when it came turn to Ken Ham's time, he says absolutely nothing. So even if he was presented with a piece of evidence that said irrefutably that there is no God, would not matter. And this is part of the reason why many atheists and non-believers have a big problem with religion. Because it doesn't matter, it seems. They'll just take their truth and that's it. And when we look up what is secularism, it is essentially a indifference towards religion. It's essentially a neutral position you could take. It's that you're not religious, but you don't really get involved in a religious debate. Generally, you don't really want one religion over the other. More of a neutral position, or one of the most neutral positions, if you ask me. But then when you Google secular religion, you start having problems. Because the definition is a non-theistic communal belief system. So non-theistic, very obvious, no deity, no God. Communal just means community, and it says belief system. So it's a non-theistic belief system. Well, guess what? That can actually cover a wide range of subjects. And this is one of the problems that people have with when they call secular religion is, I mean, think about it this way. Every single religion has, for the most part, has its own gods that they believe in. But inside there, they got different subsections of their religion. Now, they might have different belief systems in and of themselves in these little sections. However, they all generally will come back to, we believe in the same God. Well, this is where we start having problems when we're trying to attribute secular religion. Because now it's all over the place. Because some are saying, oh, liberalism is secular religion. Others are saying, well, sports are secular religion. Others are saying it's politics. Like the whole political system is their form of religion. Others are saying it's the specific ones. Well, the communism or the socialism or this or that. It's because when you're saying in this is that we're all, despite the fact we're apparently all the same part of the religious group, we're all worshiping different things. This doesn't work out. And again, I find there's bigger problems when we're looking at the political systems, because I suppose mostly when they talk about political systems, they're talking about your political belief. If you're a liberal, if you're progressive, or this or that, any of the other left-wing political theories that are in the middle. So what they're saying is that you're so dedicated to your political stance that that's your new religion. Well, that doesn't work out for a few reasons, because about half of the population just doesn't give a shit about politics. I mean, I know the world is very politically involved now at every turn, but most people don't care about politics that much. Maybe they go out and vote whenever it's time to go out, but they don't really follow what's going on. They got their own lives. They don't give a shit, or just have absolutely zero interest. I have a friend like this. He has zero interest in politics. He's also not religious. So politics can't be apparently his secular religion. He's not a sports fan, so that's not a secular religion. This guy's kind of quiet, keeps to himself. He likes to do his own thing. So I really could not point out what is a secular religion. But let's compare some of the things that would make you consider religious. What are the things that come with religion? Well, how about doctrines? Doctrines? Well, there's no specific secular religious doctrine. There are those for religious doctrines. You know, you got the Bible, you got the Torah, you got the Quran. But then apparently every single secular person has their own different doctrine, because not all of them even follow the same political beliefs. This doesn't really work out. In fact, I would say over in the election that just happened, the 2016 political election, if you ask me, it was the right that had a lot more what you could call secular religion. Because if you were to make the comparison of a secular religion, I suppose communism would almost be your best bet, just for the sole fact that it seems communism gives rise to the cult of personality, one individual at the top, which has happened throughout communism. And this seemed to be what was going on the right. It was like a religious devotion to Trump that is still present among his base today, who are generally Christian. They're showing a shit ton of religious debate to this one man. They're showing a shit ton of religious devotion to this one man, and it actually specifically says in their doctrine that you're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to idealize any one individual. The only person you're supposed to idealize is God. So apparently this has already gone out the window, but yet we're being accused of this. And what are you going to, and if we go back to the political debate, is your political doctrine your secular religion? Well, once again, this doesn't work out. If you're talking politics in general, that doesn't really work out, because what religion changes every 4 to 8 years? We vote all the time, and our parties always change. Now, if you're talking the devotion to your side, well, seculars are incredibly liberal, and that's their secular religion. Yes, and Christians are generally very conservative, and they play their side of politics. They're trying to turn what has become partisan politics into the religious debate, which doesn't work. Like, I understand why they're trying to make that, but it doesn't work because it doesn't add up. Because one's a political philosophy. What is your politics? And sure, your politics does influence your lives. But at the same time, and we're going to get into it in just a minute, but politics also influences how the Christian conservatives live their lives. In fact, I argue more so than their actual doctrine. While inside the conservatism, there is a Christian root. So a lot of what they follow is Christian related, but I still argue that more of that has to do with them following their political beliefs than their religious beliefs. Because their political beliefs don't match up to what is actually in the Bible sometimes. Sometimes some of the things they want is actually literally against what God wants. Now, some are saying sports, and more specifically Olympians, as our new form of secular religion. Those are the ones we look to. Yeah, once again, does not add up. Because there are plenty of people on the right who like their sports. Would that be considered their version of religion too? But then let's think back who they're looking at. They're talking about the Olympians. Well, it just so happened that the Olympics are strictly started as a religious thing. Well, let's first of all, Olympics. It's named because it was the first Olympics were done at the base of Mount Olympus, which was, in Greek times, where their gods lived, at the top of the mountain. And the point of all these people coming together and competing at the base of Mount Olympus in the Olympics is because it was supposed to be them trying to reach godly status. To compete and win in the Olympics of that time made you practically an immortal. You were a human god. You were a demigod, essentially. Because you were the best that humanity had to offer, the best that the gods had created, which makes you practically a demigod. So if we're talking about sports, more specifically Olympics, there's plenty of example that it has more religious connotations than secular. And again, what if we go back to ancient Roman times? There were plenty of stories of riots breaking out after chariot races because they'd have, roughly 4 or 5 teams running of different colors, and each fan was a diehard of their own color. So literally riots broke out. If the blue team won and the green team was pissed off because they felt like they had been cheated out, they would riot. This was at a time when everybody was religious. So you really cannot attribute sports as a secular religion, because it's just been as prominent inside actual religion. What about science? Well, isn't science our doctrine? Are not the secular religious... Is not science the doctrine that we follow? No. Because science is a fucking tool. It's what we use. It describes what the world is. So that's what we use to figure out how the world works, because that is the point. And the reason so many secularists and atheists look to science and put trust in science, which is different than faith. We put trust in science because science is actually provable. Science needs all its work laid out. It needs to explain what they thought was going to happen, their experiments, what ended up happening, and their conclusion. This is highly verifiable. Everybody can test it. And the whole point of science is you're supposed to come out with the exact same results every time. Or at least very close to the same results, at the very least. This is a provable method. A provable tool that has been very effective at getting us where we are today. Any religious person who has a problem with science, you better throw away your car, throw away all your electronics, and essentially don't eat, because science is responsible for farming and growing food to be what it is today, to be as effective. This allows technology, and science has allowed farmers, one farmer, to be able to plow 100-acre field in a day. This was not possible back in the day when you had ox pulling a fucking cart. Science has only made our life better. And it's a tool. That's all it is. It is a tool to help tell you what things are and how to improve our situation, our material situation. So this is not a doctrine. Science is what things are. There's a big difference between the two. And let's look at the main difference between science and religion. Religion requires faith. Science requires empirical evidence. Faith does not require empirical evidence. Faith says you believe what you believe regardless of empirical evidence. So this, once again, doesn't add up. Boy, we're moving fast. These arguments are just falling apart right in front of us, aren't they? So why don't we look at the difference between religion ethics and secular ethics? For this, of course, we're going to use Christianity ethics just because it is the one that we live under here in the West. In a nutshell, it's empathy, logic, critical thinking, reason. These are essentially the fundamentals of secular values. Now let's get into at least a few specifics here. We can't go through all of them, but we'll at least go through some of the big ones. Free thinking. Here's one that almost nobody can say is a bad thing. Free thinking. Thinking for yourself. You use logic, reason, problem solving, empirical evidence in order to get to the bottom of whatever it is you're looking at. I don't know. Off to me, that doesn't sound too bad. That tells you, first of all, to use your brain and think. Humanism. Humanism has always been at the base of secularism. And what is humanism? Well, humanism is putting the value on human beings, both individually and collectively. What it's telling us is to treat people well because they are humans. Essentially, use your own experiences to figure out how to treat people. Because you don't treat people because you know how you don't like to be treated, which is essentially just about the same way everybody else likes to be treated, you know? You are the one who does good because you are hoping that in return you will be treated the same. I know it sounds like it's very much the golden rule: treat people the way you want to be treated, but it's not just that simple. It's not as simple as just treat people the way you want to be treated. It has to do with doing good for the sake of doing good because you know it's the right thing to do, because you know it's a good thing to do. The whole point of humanism is to progress humanity. What makes humanity move forward? The bad actions don't make humanity move forward. It takes us back. This is the whole point of humanism, is to avoid these as much as possible. And finally, just the actual secularism part of it itself is to keep the separation of church and state. Is essentially because just about every single religious institution across the board, doesn't matter if it's Christians, Islam, or any of the previous religions that have gone, that were here and gone. Just about every single religious institution that has come into power has been corrupted. Why is a religious institution that is based on the morality of God so easily corrupted? Now, I understand the old saying that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely, of course. We've seen this time and time again, but when you live your life on the morality of God, and this is exactly the morality that's supposed to keep you in line, that the Almighty Creator gave to us to make sure that we live good, ethical lives. Why are they so easy to throw that away? They'll throw that out the window just to get a little bit of power. This is why I don't believe in religion, because I find that when you peek behind the curtain, it's ugly. It's really ugly. It comes to you with this, we're peaceful, we're loving, and that is the overt message. But there just seems to be so much, in my opinion, intolerance underneath religion, where they say, well, we respect all these freedoms, we respect everybody as they are. It's not true. If you don't believe what they believe in, then you are the enemy, And in fact, just because you don't believe what they believe in, you're burning in hell based on their based on their belief system. How very moral. But then am I the only one who's noticed that Christian morality has changed over the years, over the centuries? Because many people, the religious types, like to talk about how, well, the West was founded on Judeo-Christian values. But even they don't seem to realize what those Judeo-Christian values are. Because then they would realize that how many of those we've gotten away from since the founding of America, how many of those we believe are immoral today. But then they've got to twist and bend and turn all the words of the Bible in order to make it fit. They'll talk about, oh, well, it was a bunch of Christians that freed slaves. Well, first off, let's just get right into it. Let's get into the Christian values just so we can lay them down before we start picking them apart. So I broke them up into a few different categories. The first one is just historically. What has always historically been Judeo-Christian values? The next two are how they have been adopted by conservatives and liberals in America. And I mean the religious conservatives and the religious liberals, not just you're part of the party. So, what values has Christianity taught? It's taught love of God. It's talked about the dangers of infidelity. It's talked about peaceful non-violence, which, yes, there are the quotes that say non-violence inside the Bible, but yet at the same time, there's plenty of times where apparently it's justified. Forgiveness. Not that you have to forgive them, just they need to get forgiveness from their God. Yeah, it doesn't matter really what you think. Unconditional love. Love thy enemy. Yeah. Whenever has a Christian conservative loved thy enemy? Self-righteousness. Most, I would say, are self-righteous. This is supposed to be like Jesus told them not to be self-righteous, but I would say many Christians are self-righteous. Charity, honesty, and be humble. Again, I find that if the humbleness kind of falls in line with self-righteousness, you can't really be humble if you're self-righteous. Honesty, well, that is, I would actually kind of say, yeah, that's more or less true that the Bible preaches to be honest, but what I find a little bit funny is when we do have something that is true, that is honest, if it doesn't match their religion, they're totally willing to lie about it. I mean, there's plenty of evidence for evolution, like, we found enough missing links in between, but because we have not found absolutely every little fine detail, Christians say that evolution is not a real theory. It's not verifiable. It's no good. But meanwhile, all they have to verify creationism is the Bible, and then they say, look around you, how could this not be made? And lastly, Christian values tell you to abstain from food sacrifices to idols, and because Christian tells you do not idolize anybody but God, that's one of the main reasons. Abstain from blood. I'm not 100% whether they mean drinking or just what, but abstain from blood. Abstain from meat of a strangled animal. But I think this, I don't know, but I have heard that when an animal struggles, when you kill an animal for meat, you want it to be relaxed, because if it tenses up, it's supposed to make the meat go bad. So I almost wonder if this has something to do with it, but... And sexual immorality. Now, let's get into the modern day conservatives. What is their belief? Censorship of sexual content, anti-abortion, abstinence-only education and abstinence before marriage, creationism, anti-gay marriage, and organized school prayer. I gotta say, all in all though, most of the stuff that they have in there does not have to do with actual morality. I mean, I understand when they say censorship of sexual content, although there's apparently nothing about violence in there. What's more, they're totally okay showing 100 people being killed, but then, hell, you see one nipple and it's the end of the fucking world. Anti-abortion, okay, well, I know their position that they believe life begins from conception, so okay, I'm not even going to touch that one this time. I will let that one slide. Abstinence only education, abstinence before marriage. Well, you give me one justification why people that have been not living together, but just together for 5 fucking years but not married yet should not have sex. I mean, seriously, give me a justification. People have always, sex is a natural urge, especially in guys, so to actually tell them abstinence before marriage, just absolutely no sex no matter what, is stupid. The other problem is when you do abstinence only education, people generally are very uneducated about sex and sexually transmitted disease and pregnancy, and those rates skyrocket wherever there's abstinence only marriage. Because that's what they're told. Don't worry about it. You don't need to worry about it. It's not till you're older. You won't have to worry about it till you're about to get married. And then these teenagers give in to their urges and fuck. And then they wonder why fucking led to pregnancy. Creationism, once again, I don't know what this has to do with actual morality. It has to do with how the world was created. Anti-gay marriage, they just believe it's between one man and one woman, but apparently two people that want to get married, oh no, they love each other. How fucking terrible, because they happen to be from the same sex. How about you get the fuck out of their lives, motherfucker? I mean, I'm married to a woman right now. But if somebody came up to me and had some moral dilemma about us being together and how it's immoral for us to be together, I tell them to fuck off, because nobody's going to tell me who the fuck I'm going to marry. But then if we look at those same Judeo-Christian values from the liberal side, what do they believe in? Environmental protection, compassion, war as a last resort, a living wage, and progressive tax. Do these sound like actual religious belief systems to you? No, they sound political. These sound conservative. These sound liberal. They sound right-wing. They sound left-wing. They don't sound religious. This is why I believe many Christians have, in fact, turned their back on Christian morality. And they need to put up this fucking Wizard of Oz type scenario of how you need God to tell you what to do. But if we were actually to take a look at what was in the Bible, we see plenty of immoral shit. I mean, just to name a few, I have some right here. What values, what ethics have changed over time? Well, how about slavery? As stated in Matthew 10:24 and Ephesians 6:5. What about beating your children? As a form of discipline, beating them with a rod, which is in Proverbs 13:24, 20:30, and 23:13. And then there's also, how about killing your children for talking back to their parent? Because, it says, honor thy father, thy mother, which I'm not against honoring thy father and mother. I'm a big supporter of that, but I'm just saying, if you're going to kill your kid over that, then you got a big fucking problem. But yeah, what about killing your kid for talking back? That is seen in Leviticus 29 and Deuteronomy 21:18 through 21. If we're really going by Judeo-Christian values, then you should be able to beat your kid, kill them for talking back to you, and so long as you don't kill it, you should have every right to own and beat a slave. There's Judeo-Christian values for you. Christian morality shouldn't technically change over time, because everything they get is from the Bible, and the 10 Commandments and all the stories within the Bible. So according to God, that was all they needed. Until God comes back to give us an update, a third testament to the Bible, the second testament, the New Testament, is all we need. Because apparently, despite the fact that God's paying attention, God has felt that an update to the Bible and to human morality, despite all the changes we made over the last couple hundred years, apparently that's not necessary. No. We don't need any change whatsoever. Everything's good to go. So Christian morality should not change, because it's right there in the Bible, and it should be taken as it states right there in the Bible. So if you're all of a sudden changing around and your policies are no longer the same, then clearly your morality is changing. And if your morality is changing, then no, you're not just getting your morality from Judeo-Christian values. It because then it would never change. This doesn't work out. Anytime Christians try and change around their morals, they're literally going against God, against their own belief system. So before I leave you today, I wanted to quickly cover just a couple articles that I found. Not going to go through the whole thing. I've taken up enough of your time today. So the first one's from westernseminary.edu, and it's called American Values Are Not Necessarily Christian Values, written in January 28th, 2015. And just skipping ahead into the article already a little bit, it says, Christians in America have not only suffered from the assumption that American values are Christian values, we have also contributed to it. Like Izzo's trading his birthright for lentils, we are all too eager to demonstrate what good citizens we are, and in exchange we give up what makes us distinct. So are American values Christian values? No. While there are some shared values, there are plenty of core American values that run counter to the values of Christ and his followers. Here are a few American values that don't cut it as Christian values. Patriotism is not a Christian value. Patriotism is loyalty of one's homeland and a willingness to defend it against aggression. Patriotism is needed in order for a country to be free from rule by another country. Christian loyalty is not to America or any homeland. It is to a kingdom and a ruler that is not of this world, a kingdom that extends freedom to all nations and calls us to be free of the rule of any country, including one which we live. Patriotism asks Christians to divide our loyalty, to share our devotion, and to split our allegiance between God and country. Not all idols are golden. Some are red, white, and blue. Nationalism is not a Christian value. Patriotism is about loyalty, while nationalism is about identity. Nationalism carries the notion that one's nation is superior to, preferred over, or otherwise at odds with other nations. God does not love America any more than God loves Finland or India, nor should we. The notion that one's identity is wrapped up in the nation state is inherently at odds with Christianity. Christians believe that each person belongs to God or the enemy. Those are the choices, and that is the reality in which we live and die. Nationalism forges and reinforces allegiances and enemies that are false. War is not a Christian value. Of course not. War and the subsequent killing and dying is needed by nations, including America, in order to form a national identity and fuel patriotism. For America to really matter, someone has to die for it, and it has to be worth killing for. Christian identity is also formed through the shedding of blood, but it is a sacrifice made once and for all by Christ. To kill and die for a nation is neither noble nor godly. Doing so elevates country too far, making it a bloodthirsty deity. Many veterans and citizens who have lost loved ones in the war have a deep river of sentimentality towards war. But this is a misplaced sentiment. The fact that you suffered or lost a loved one in war does not make war something Christians should value. Now, when I do hear Christian conservatives or Jewish conservatives speaking on this matter, a good one is Dennis Prager. They talk about how, when a lot of time they're trying to justify the war, they like to use the term evil when describing their enemy. Now, I've spoken out many times against radical Islamic ideology and groups, plenty of times. But what Prager and many of his kind like to do is they like to envelop everybody in the nation under the flag of evil. Now, they always back this up. They always backstep on this because later on they'll talk about the civilians and the innocent people and, the good people over there. But when they're trying to justify the war, they will always wrap it in this cloak of evil. Individualism is not a Christian value. What do Americans fight and die for? Liberty, the freedom of people and each person. Christians believe that each person matters, whether him or her, from fetus to fertilizer, loved or hated, rich and poor, and all in between. But the American value is not focused on individual worth. It is focused on individual rights, especially the individual's right to choose. This value finds its end in allowing each person to be the center of his or her own universe. There is a center to the universe, metaphorically speaking, and it's not me, or you, or him, or her. The gospel welcomes all people equally to humble themselves before God and find true identity as a member of a chorus praising the one who is the center, beginning, and end of all. This is another one I've said many times that I have a problem with, is when they say that Judeo-Christian values preaches individualism because it always talks about your dedication to God. And to stray is to blaspheme against God, is to go against God and to risk being sent to hell. This does not exactly encourage individualism or free thinking or freedom of speech. So these are all main core tenets that a lot of people like to attribute to Judeo-Christian values, but I don't see how they ever matched up to it. In fact, I would argue that these were much more core liberal principles. I'm not saying that liberals of today necessarily hold all the core principles of liberalism, but what was liberalism, what true liberalism is, these are all the core tenets of it: freedom of expression, freedom of speech, individualism. Materialism is not a Christian value. How do we Americans keep score? We look at our wealth, our prosperity, and our accumulation. America is doing well if people buy stuff. For America to be strong has as much to do with our economy as our military. But strength and success measured by material wealth is not a Christian value. What it means for Christians to be strong is to put our trust in God, to grow in godly character, and to recognize our weakness and lack so we might more fully give glory to the one who is strong, just, and never lacking. I think it's time for Christians in America and everywhere to embrace being weird. Christian values are not American values, and while America may be a great place to live, at least for some of us, that's no excuse for conflating country and church. We can appreciate and even respect the nation in which we reside, but we must not forget that our status is as foreigners and exiles. So the next article I want to cover comes from Catholic.org, and it's called "Is Secularism a Religion?" And I can't really find a date on this article, so I'm not sure when it was published. But anyway, it's a short article. We don't really have to go past the first half in order to dismantle the argument, and the rest of it just falls apart from there. So we'll just get right into it. Recently, the ACLU and other organizations who allegedly supposed to protect our civil liberties have been attacking monuments that contain the Ten Commandments all over the United States. They say that these monuments are in violation of the First Amendment, whereby, quote, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, end quote. Besides the fact that our country was founded on biblical principles, in some regards, yes, but as we just showed throughout the rest of this episode, in many regards, no. That Congress has never made a law that promotes a particular religion, and that their actions clearly violate the precept of free exercise of religion shouldn't be prohibited. I would like to make a case for the idea that promoting secularism is no different than promoting any other religion. This is where things get bad. This paragraph here. Loosely defined, religion is nothing more than a belief system that moves its members to action or to support a cause with fervent devotion. For us Catholics and most belief systems, it is based on the idea that there is some sort of higher power. Atheism and secularism, the difference between the two is inconsequential for this argument, is not the absence of a belief system, rather is the belief that there is no God and that other belief systems should be rejected or ignored. To be an atheist, the higher power is humankind or perhaps the environment, or an aspect based on both, such as science. So, this is why the argument falls apart. It starts off, he does say loosely defined religion is nothing more than a belief system that moves its members to action or support a cause with fervent devotion, which you could, if we're taking in a very, very, very loose definition, sure. But if we even look towards the dictionary, so if we go towards and look at the dictionary, for this one we're using the Cambridge Dictionary. It says, religion, the belief in and worship of a god or gods, or any such system of belief and worship. And he said, if we go back to the article once again, that loosely defined, but religion is nothing more than a belief system that moves its members to action or to support a cause with fervor and devotion. But as we just saw, system of belief and worship at the very least. So this doesn't work when you're talking using that as a description for religion to begin with. But then you come down here to where he talks about atheism and secularism, and he says, it is not the absence of a belief system, rather it is the belief that there is no God, and that other belief systems should be rejected or ignored. But they say it is the belief that there is no God. Textbook atheist definition, and every atheist will tell you, it's not that we don't believe there isn't a God, it's that we have a lack of belief in God. We don't have a belief in God. So you're trying to attribute a completely different term to the meaning. And the reason why is because you need the word belief in there. Because if we look at the Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of believe, we have two different ones we can go to. We have to have a firm or wholehearted religious conviction or persuasion, to regard the existence of God as a fact. And then if we go back down to the second one, it says to consider to be true or honest. What is the difference? Is one is an intransit verb and the other is a transit verb. A transit verb is a verb that requires one or more objects. An intransit verb which does not have any objects. So when we look at that definition, we're talking about truth. We take the transitive side, which is what would be the atheists use to describe their belief system. It is what is true or what is honest. But if we take the Christian's way of using belief, which is the intransitive verb, their belief system has to do with the supernatural. Do you believe in a God? So they need the term believe in there because they need belief in the way that they use the term belief in order to say that they're promoting secularism like a religion. It says, as Catholics, our belief systems certainly compel us to act a certain way. There are specific guidelines that we try to follow, and there are more general aspects of being Catholic that cause us to behave in a certain way or make a decision differently than a non-Catholic would. The same criterion applies to the secular belief system. There are guidelines that secularists would follow that a Catholic would not, based on the atheist idea that other belief systems should be rejected or ignored. And again, what would be the difference on this? One, the Catholic side, is going about their belief, their tradition, their religion. The other one has to do on the well-being of the person. So essentially, they're rejecting the well-being of the person, because that's what every atheist will tell you they stand by. Because even back up here, just a second ago, it says to atheists, the highest power is humankind, or perhaps the environment. I don't know, I'm sure some would say nature they consider the highest authority, which I guess in some regards it is, because it could wipe us all out if it wanted to. But I don't consider that to be the highest authority, because if it was, then it was authority to be listened to. We don't listen to nature, so it's not an authority. Humankind? Yes, I do think humankind is the highest authority. But I mean this in the sense that the well-being of humankind is the ultimate authority. The well-being of people is the ultimate authority. Theirs is God is the ultimate authority. And guess what? God always doesn't act in the best interest of people. So that's where the difference comes in this article. Both groups to pursue their beliefs in fervent devotion. The word fervent is open to debate because there are people whom we would call cultural Catholics, and not all secularists are up in arms about the Decalogue. Cultural Catholics are people that use the Bible as a moral guideline, but they don't use it as their ultimate authority. There's a difference there. See, it guides them on how to interact with people, but they're not trying to present it as fact or repress others through it. So this is why you don't get the same thing from secularists, because this is exactly how secularists, atheists, agnostics. I can't, maybe not agnostics, I'm sure agnostics, but this is be more the way that they'd want you to take the Bible. Not as an overt thing, but not as an overt truth. It's like, this is exactly how the world is made, but it should be a moral guideline. Fine, be your moral guideline. I won't complain with you there. Maybe some will, I won't. But there certainly is devotion among members of both belief groups. At some level, there is a reason why an individual will call themselves Catholic or atheist. This is the same place where we would see the devotion that an individual has to his or her belief system. Yeah, well, one of the big differences is an atheist can change his belief system based on the evidence. So, if based on the evidence, an atheist sees that maybe an agnostic point of view is the best way, they can change their point of view to agnostic. A Catholic cannot. Unless they're going to leave the religion, they cannot change their point of view. Because if they change their point of view, they go against God, and then suddenly they have sinned. Or they go against it, and then they realize all the inconsistencies in their religion, and it just falls apart in front of their eyes. And again, big difference between Catholic and atheists. Atheists need empirical evidence. I certainly do not want to undermine the beauty and truth of our Catholic faith by claiming there is straight up comparison between our faith and the secularist belief system. I don't believe the government should force people in a belief system. However, it seems that this is what is happening today. Meanwhile, they were trying to force everybody in that court to be abided by them. Or at the very least, realize they're underneath the Christian rule when they're in there. When you put the 10 Commandments up in a courthouse, which is just a public building, it's a place of justice, yes, but they're complaining because people had it taken down. Well, that doesn't abide by everybody's religion. So in a secular society, everybody has the same right. I mean, if they have every right to put up the 10 Commandments, not exactly the same sort of thing happened, but something very similar, what's stopping a Satanist from being able to put up one of their core doctrines or principles? Because this happened one time. Catholics wanted, I don't remember where, it was a few years ago, Catholics wanted to put up a statue of whoever, Jesus or a member of his apostles or someone. Well, the Satanists came back and said, well, if they get to put up a statue, we get to put up a statue. Well, let me tell you something. Nobody got a statue once the Satanists said they wanted one. Funny how that works out. We want religious freedom, speaking from the Catholic side, but nobody else really gets it. I mean, let's think, what if it was not Satanists, but it was Muslims who wanted to put up a statue of Muhammad? There would be the same fucking outrage. So, they're really Catholics prove time and time again they're intolerant to anybody who's not part of their religion, even if they play the overt, I'm a very tolerant and loving Christian. As a whole, the religion is not. Secularism is just as much a religion in the legal sense as Catholicism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Protestantism, and Judaism. No, they're not, because 1, 2, 3, 4 of those have a deity. And Buddhism, well, it's not as much a religion in the sense as Catholic, Hinduism, Protestantism, and Judaism, because those all have deities. And there's very big differences between Buddhism and secularism, so that once again is not a very good comparison. By repressing our belief system in favor of another, Congress or the courts has made a law that respects an establishment of religion, and it violates our right to exercise it without prohibition. Well, I can tell you one thing. I know that I can't just go to the courthouse and put up whatever I want. You need permission, which comes through the government. And if the government does give you permission, even if they haven't enacted a law, they have overstepped because they have favored one religion over the other. So I just wanted to go through those a few times, break them down. And last one real quick, I'm just going to show you in literally 2 seconds. It's just this last one where somebody else is making another one. The religion of secularism. And he gives these two quotes from Wikipedia. First one is on religion. The second one is on secularism. As you can see, I'm putting up the side-by-side right now. And you can see that these definitions do not match up with what was put on Wikipedia. At best, this person took some of the stuff that was in Wikipedia and rewrote it in their own words. But they rewrote it in their own words to match their... But they rewrote it in their own words to match the dialogues they wanted. You can find, when you look in the religion part, you can find snippets of it where it is more or less cut word for word. But when you look in the secularism, it's almost completely been rewritten. So this just shows to what extent, what length they have to go to in order to show, just to try and get that comparison between secularism and religion as being the same. And this is because religion has taken such a beating these days in the truth department, which, going back again to that last article where he said in the last, where he said, I don't want to undermine the beauty and truth of our Catholic faith. This is the irony, because faith doesn't require empirical evidence. But they want to rewrite the meaning of truth these days. This was a long episode. Thank you for staying in there. I am going, for YouTube, I am going to be cutting this down to smaller segments and posting them. Smaller snippets. So that way nobody has to go through the whole whatever hour and 20 or whatever, however long this ended up being. I want to thank you for joining me on the podcast today. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion. I'll see you next time. You prophet!